Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Our mind, we've lived with since we were young, and our mind is the tool that we use to interface with the world, to interface with form. But our mind has to be clarified by wisdom. In other words, our mind isn't always on point. It isn't always telling us the truth. It isn't always taking us in the correct direction. It isn't always telling us what we need to know. Often it leads us into improper places. And that's why wisdom has to constantly be close to us to clarify what's coming out of us. When we were young, as children, as we grew, we developed certain ideas. These ideas somehow get altered over time, but we have a storehouse of ideas that we developed, that we've taken from the world, and that we've taken from our contemporaries, that we've taken from our parents, and that we've taken from our culture. And we are burdened with these ideas. Now, truth and wisdom and grace and the effulgence of those things are within us and have always been within us. But they are hidden from us. They are hidden through Maya, illusion, and through all of the ideas that we've picked up from illusion, from the world. You know, when you're mining gems, if you go into the mine and you find a gem, it's usually encrusted within other rock. Then you have to pull it out, and it doesn't shine. It doesn't glitter. It has to be clean. It has to be faceted. And then it begins to show itself and show its true nature of what it is capable of being. And it's like that with us. We have hidden within us this effulgence and this grace, and it needs to be uncovered. And until it's uncovered, we are in a different state. Until it's uncovered, we are in a baby state. We are in an immature state. We are with a state that is easily influenced by all the glitters and fascinations around us, that's easily influenced by desire, and is easily influenced by our needs to grab whatever desires are put in front of us. This is what happens with babies, and this is what happens to immature humans. They continue to act like children as they grow up. Now, children start school, and in the beginning, they learn their ABCs. The intention, of course, is to learn how to read and to eventually get to university. So there's these humble beginnings. The humble beginnings is to learn the ABCs, but eventually you end up at university. Now, while you're studying in the primary grades, in the lower grades, nobody gets too excited about anything. Nobody makes too big a fuss about anything, because none of this is all that important. There is no earth-shattering decisions that are made at that time. But eventually, you end up in university. You've gone through various books, you've gone through various learnings, and you end up at a place where now you have to begin to make some decisions. You have to decide, what is it that you want to do? What kind of career are you going to put yourself into? This is quite different than what happens in primary school when everybody's mostly playing around. Now a decision has to be made. With all of this knowledge that you've picked up, do you want to become an engineer? Do you want to become a doctor? Do you want to become a lawyer? What is the profession? You want to become a professor? You want to become a wise man? What is the profession that you want to go into? Now, all of a sudden, there is a different attitude towards the learning than what occurred before. Now, all of a sudden, the exams are getting more specific, more difficult. They require more intense concentration and more intense study. And if you can't put together that intensity of concentration, if you can't put together that intensity of study, you leave and you go on to get a job in a field that is more suitable to the level of your intention, or to the level of the amount of work that you're willing to put into it, or to the level of the intellect that you're able to muster. It's like that on a spiritual path also. People go from teacher to teacher, and sometimes they stay, sometimes they don't stay. They look for answers to their questions, and sometimes they're satisfied, and sometimes they're not satisfied. But what happens is, as the time with a teacher goes further and further, things become more focused and more focused. And unless the student is able to focus as the teacher focuses the teachings, then the student loses touch with the teaching, doesn't understand the teaching, doesn't imbibe the teaching, doesn't take on the teaching. The teaching becomes words that have very little meaning. What the teacher is trying to do, and what happens is that the teacher only knows one point, and that point is the association with God, the association with Allah. And what the teacher is trying to teach is how to achieve that one point, how to make that connection with Allah. But in order to do that, the teacher begins to set down some rules which for a lot of people are very difficult to accept. The teacher says you have to give up your attachment to all the glitters that you've accumulated, all of the artifacts that you've accumulated, all the ideas that you've accumulated, all the prayers that you've accumulated, all the meditations that you've accumulated, all the qualities that you've accumulated that are other than God. So here you are, a person who's grown up in the world, who's been inundated in the world, who carries this incredible assortment of thousands of attachments, attachments to religion, attachments to prayer, attachments to people, attachments to possessions, attachments to power, attachments to anger, attachments to jealousy, attachments to hastiness, attachments to all kinds of different things in all kinds of different manners. If we look at ourselves closely, we can see that we, in our years on this earth, have picked up so many different habits, so many different attachments, and so many things that we've become accustomed to, and we've become in love with. We love our possessions. We love our attachments. We love our points of view. We love the people we're involved with. We love all of these things that we've gathered. And when the teacher says, stop, all of these things are like the crust on the jewel. They keep you from seeing the truth. They stop the light from the jewel from escaping. And what you've done is you've covered it up because of your attachment to illusion. And all of these things are illusion. Yet you don't understand the nature of illusion. You don't understand what illusion is and how it functions. And until you get to the point where you do understand that, there's going to be a real difficulty in giving up the things that you're being asked to give up. Now, a flower has a fragrance, but the fragrance comes after the bloom opens up. The bloom, in this example, has 6 petals, and those petals are earth, air, fire, water, ether, and illusion. And we have to detach ourselves from each of those petals to get to the true fragrance that is inherent within us since our inception. Now, it begins with the faith that inherent within you since your inception is wisdom and grace and effulgence, which means that you have to have a view of yourself that's elevated. But to have this view of yourself that's elevated, to understand that grace and wisdom and effulgence are within you, simultaneously, you have to understand that these same qualities are in everybody else. And if you can't acknowledge them in everybody else, you become incapable of acknowledging them in yourself. So what happens is you say, nobody has them. I don't have them. Nobody has them. But in truth, everybody has them. And until you see it in others, you're not going to see it in yourself. And this is one of the accomplishments that the Sheikh does on your behalf. He shows you these qualities. He becomes a mirror for you for these qualities. So he shows you these qualities in yourself so you can begin to believe that they exist. Because words like grace and wisdom and effulgence to somebody who lives in Maya are very far from actual experience, are very far from knowing and understanding. But when you're with a sheikh who carries these qualities, all of a sudden that understanding comes and you're able to see it. For instance, the sheikh does not react to things in the way people react to things in this world. The sheikh has no self-interest. And because he has no self-interest, he doesn't react out of self-interest. He reacts from wisdom, he reacts from grace, and he reacts from effulgence. And when you see that happen, and you see it happen over time consistently, you begin to recognize that there is a difference between reacting from self-interest and reacting from transcendent qualities. The whole thing is different. So we, each of us, have to begin to ask ourselves, how do we get to these transcendent qualities? Well, for starters, they're already in you. So since they're already in us, that means they're not that far away. So what is it that we have to do? Well, we have to give up our anger. We have to give up our sense of possession. We have to give up our power. We have to give up our fame. We have to give up all of the attachments that we have to form. These eyes see form. And what these eyes see is what we have to give up. So very clearly and very distinctly, if you see it, you have to give it up. We have to transfer from form to not form. We have to transfer from self-motive to not being motivated by the I, to having a larger perspective, a unified perspective of existence, wherein there is a sameness amongst us and that we share being as opposed to being individuated and separated. We share identity. We share being. We share soul. We share God. We share unity. We are part of unity. And if we refuse and keep ourselves separated and keep ourselves individuated, then we'll never understand that effulgence that is only known in unity. We'll never understand that grace that is only known in unity. We'll never understand wisdom because wisdom doesn't have self-motive. This wisdom comes from the light. Wisdom comes from the truth. Wisdom comes from God's qualities and the understanding of God's qualities and using God's qualities to form decisions and to form ways that we come to do things. It requires an alternate response to the world. It requires a new understanding of who we are and what our connection is truly to things. But for most people, the glitters of the world have fascinated them for such an extensive period of time. And the glitters of the world have fed them for such an extensive period of time that they don't want to venture into this new understanding. They don't want to venture into this new universe. They don't want to venture into this new way of seeing things because they don't want to give up what they have. They've become attached to it. When I first met my sheikh, I was a young lawyer and I was working for a man who was also a lawyer, obviously. And I brought him a book from Bawa. And I said, you should read this. It could change your life. It's very interesting. And I really liked my boss at the time. And he was, on the surface, a very pleasant, nice man. And the next day, he walks into my office with the book. And he said, it's very interesting. And he gave it back to me. And he said, but in order to do what he says, I have to give up all of the things that I want. And he got it immediately. There was a choice to be made here. He did not want to make that choice. He didn't want to go to that step. And this happens even with people who are with the sheikh, even with people who have come to the sheikh. They come there with limited intention. They come there with limited willingness to follow through on what needs to be followed through on. And that's when the thing gets a little rough. That's when things become tense. And that's when people leave one sheikh for another sheikh because they don't want to get to the point of no return. They don't want to get to the point of the ultimate decision. They don't want to get to the point where you finally make the break with illusion, where you finally make the break with Maya and go on into understanding the truth. This is the difficult step. And this is the step that the sheikh eventually gets you to. So there's lots of playing and lots of carrying on until you get to that step. And all of a sudden, things become serious. And they become too serious. In truth, they're never serious at all, because the truth is not serious. It's just the truth. And the truth is overwhelming and emancipating and effulgent. But when you can't see the truth and you're holding on to Maya, the truth looks onerous. The truth looks difficult. The truth looks like it's taking something away from you. I had another experience when I was a young lawyer. I had a dilemma, and I went to the oldest lawyer in the firm. He was about 78 years old at the time. And I told him my question. And he walked into the library, which had about 2,000 books in it. And he pulled a book from the shelf, opened it up, got to a certain page, and said, "This is the case that explains that point." And I looked at him and I said, "That's pretty good. I don't think I'll ever get to the place where I can do that." And he said, "Well, to tell you the truth, this library is all I know. When I'm with my wife, I'm in this library. When I'm with my children, I'm in this library. When I'm with my grandchildren, I'm in this library. When I go to pray, I'm in this library. Don't become like me." And I've tried not to. I took the practice of law with a grain of salt, and I took most of my involvement in the world with a grain of salt. And all of us need to be able to do that. Let's not take this illusory world too seriously. Let's not give it all of our attention. Let's not believe that it is beginning and end of things, because as one gets older, one realizes how limited the scope of your employment is, how limited the scope of this illusory world is. So what happens? So the sheikh comes to the student and he says, "It's time to get married." Now, in the Sufi understanding of things, God is the only male and everyone else is a female. So all the brides, whether they're male or female, need to get ready for the marriage. But each of the brides, each of the students, have had so many experiences in their lives. They've had so many suitors in their lives. And they have had so many things that draw them in their lives that they don't want to limit themselves to this one new spouse. They don't want to limit themselves to this one understanding. Why? Because they don't truly understand it. They think it's like everything else they've touched, everything else that they've seen, everything else that they've spent time with, everything else that they know. They don't understand that this is the ultimate step in truth, the ultimate step in effulgence, the ultimate step in understanding reality. They think it's the same as everything else. So they refuse to get married. They refuse to make that connection. They refuse to finalize the path that the Sheikh has taken them on. They don't want to take that final step. And we, each of us, have to begin to understand the nature of our attachments and the nature of what we hold on to in this illusory world. And until we truly understand that, we can't cleanse the gem within us, which is wisdom, grace, and effulgence. We can't allow that to shine forth within us. But as we move forward on to that clear space, we become closer and closer to reality. You know, there is a story of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that when he was a child, angels came and removed his heart from his bosom and cleansed it and then put it back into his bosom. Now, we can pray for angels to come and remove our hearts and cleanse them, or we can begin to do the work ourselves, the work of cleansing. And what is the work of cleansing? It means stop giving credence to the world. Stop holding the world as important. Stop thinking that the world is everlasting. Understand that illusion has a time limit to it. And our time, you know, people talk about the end of the world. But in truth, the end of the world comes for each of us when the end of our physical body dissipates, when our body goes. So the world doesn't need to end for us to end. The end is coming soon. The end is usually coming within less than 100 years for everybody, maybe 120. But we have to become cognizant of that fact. We have to become aware of that fact. And we have to understand that there is a transitioning into another phase. And as you hold on to this phase, you can't transition into the next phase. As you hold on to this phase, there are magnetic pulls within the earth that if you can't let go of this phase, will hold you in place in this earth, as opposed to allowing you to go on to the kingdom of light. So we need to make an active determination, each of us, for ourselves, as to what is it that we want? What is the future in this world of illusion? Well, think about it. The answer is pretty simple. The future is that the body falls apart and eventually we go to the grave. What is the future of the world of light? It's an escape from this body with the true part of ourselves. We are not bodies that have a soul. We are truly souls that have a body. And this soul is capable of going on without the body. And we need to become to recognize that portion of us that is capable of going on without the body. We need to come in touch with that portion of us that is capable of going on without the body. And that portion has lost the fact that it gets influenced by the world. It's lost its lust for the world. It's lost its being enamored by all of the various glitters and magnetisms within the world. We need to get to that place. Right now, many of us are magnetized in a way that all of the attractions of the world pull us towards it. Well, we have to become demagnetized. Wood is not attracted by a magnet. We have to become more like wood so that the world no longer pulls and pushes us. And when the world no longer pulls and pushes us, and we let go of all of the things that we held on to, and we stop being a hoarder for all of the glitters and the fascinations of the world, then the path will open up to us to see our true selves and to know our true selves. This has to be our intention. This is the intention of the teacher. This is the point of view that the teacher is here to promote. This is the agenda that the teacher is here to promote. But what happens is, at that point of the finals, when you have to decide, are you going to do the difficult work to get the degree, or are you going to just drop out and go find a job doing somewhere else? When that comes, you have to have the determination to do the work that needs to be done to free yourself from illusion. The Quran says that if you save one person, you've saved all of humanity. Now, this does not mean that you pulled somebody out from in front of a truck that was coming at them. And that one person is not somebody else. That one person is us. And how do we save us? We save us by letting go of all of our attachments to this illusory world. We save us by letting go of all of our attachments to Maya. We save us by letting go of our need for power and fame. We save us by letting go of our need for wealth and gold and real estate and women or men. We save us by focusing in an entirely new way, and that way being the way of our Lord. And the way of our Lord is the way of his 99 qualities. The way of our Lord is the way of maintenance, sustenance, and protection. He is the great giver and the great doer. And we enter into that creative phase of reality where we become part of the creator, where we assist creation. We have to understand this, and we have to understand that this path is available for us. So without involvement with ego, without egocentric thought, we have to understand that God made it this way. And this is available for each of us. And we have to take on and understand what he made available to us and bring it to fruition. We started out as babies. We are meant to mature. And the way we mature is to get to know who we are. And when we get to know who we are, we get to know who our Lord is. But we can't know who we are when we're dragging the entire world behind us on chains. We can't get to know who we are when everything that we see we're attached to. So slowly, we have to release ourselves from all of the things that hold us in place. You know, a bird can't fly carrying furniture. A man can't swim carrying furniture. We need to fly. We need to swim. We need to escape. And all of these escape routes require letting go of everything that we've carried up to now. And if you insist on carrying, you can't do the exercise. If you insist on carrying, you can't swim. If you insist on carrying, you can't fly. So let us learn to give up what's unnecessary. Let us learn that there is more ahead of us than behind us. Let us believe that Allah's plenitude is so much greater than anything in this world, that our attachments are minor and silly and frivolous, and we need to move beyond that into truth and compassion and effulgence, and then we'll get to know the truth of who we are. May Allah take us on this path. May He make this path easy for us. May He show us the way in this path. May He attach Himself to us so that we desire Him, and desire Him with every aspect of our being. The Arabs used to say, I want to know God as a man who's traveled through the desert needs cold water. Let it be that way. Let there be this thirst that develops within us. Let us be this craving that develops within us. Let us be this need that develops within us to come and know our Lord and become part of Him. Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.